Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Aloha, everyone. Welcome to today's Building Power webinar. My name is Dania Hakeem. I'm the Program Director for Hawaii Center for Food Safety. Before we get into any content, just wanted to give you a little breakdown of what we planned for today. So first, I'll give a little introduction. Keanu Young, the Assistant Coordinator at the Public Access Room of the Hawaii State Capitol, will be doing a presentation for us. We'll have some time for Q&A, and then we'll do a quick wrap-up. So to give you a little background on Hawaii Center for Food Safety, we're a national nonprofit advocacy organization, and we've been working on sustainable food and ag issues for quite some time, actually. Been involved in the Hawaii grassroots movement for about 10 years, providing legal, policy, scientific resources to the people on the ground. This is our second year that we've been doing these virtual meetings, this webinar training series to gather organizations, community members throughout the state. We want to keep providing this content, things that are interesting and helpful for you. So we're going to be sending around a survey after the webinar. If you could fill that out and give us any ideas you have for future trainings or discussions, that would be extremely helpful. If you clicked yes when you registered for the webinar, you've been added to our Building Power listserv. So we'll send you emails of our upcoming events and webinars, so you'll be in the loop. If you didn't click yes, but you want to be involved, feel free to reach out to me. You should have my email in your registration, in that registration email. So I want to quickly orient you to the webinar format and the tools you have available. Right now, you're in listen-only mode, which means you're currently muted, and that just helps with any distracting background noise. At the end, when we do Q&A, we'll unmute you if you want to follow up with a question. If you look in the upper right-hand side of your screen, you also have the ability to ask a question. So you can type a question in throughout the presentation. I'll be monitoring those questions, and we'll present a few of those questions at the end. So please feel free to submit throughout so that we have some great questions when we get to about 12:45. If you're having any trouble, you can raise your hand. There's a little hand raise button next to your name, and we'll connect with you via chat. So now you know the software. I want to introduce you to our speaker. Keanu Young is the Assistant Coordinator at the Public Access Room. He has over a decade of legislative experience, both at state and county levels. He's worked for several representatives in a variety of roles, so he's quite familiar with the legislative process and how things work at the Capitol. His work, in addition to his work at the House of Representatives, he's also worked as a legislative aide at the Honolulu City Council. So he's going to be a great person to present all of this material to us. So with that, I'll pass it over to him. 1 second.
Okay, I want to thank Daniel and the Hawaii Center for Food Safety for inviting me over to conduct this workshop. Again, my name is Keanu Young. I'm the Assistant Coordinator of the Public Access Room. The Public Access Room is a legislative resource office at the state capitol. We were created 25 years ago by the Hawaii State Legislature. Our primary role is to help citizens understand the legislative process. We deal specifically with process, never with politics or policy. We are a division of the Legislative Reference Bureau. So we actually have an office at the Capitol for the public to come by. There's public computers. We can make copies of testimonies. We create information sheets. We conduct workshops like this on the legislative process. So it's a one-stop shop of information, not only for the public, but also for, even legislators use our offices, legislative offices, government agencies, and nonprofits. So if you guys are ever by the Capitol, please come visit us. We're, again, in room 401. Just real quick, we are the only food service legislative resource office like this in the entire country. So that's one of the ways in which we are lucky to live Hawaii. This is what our office looks like. We're on the 4th floor, room 401 of the Hawaii State Capitol. Again, we deal specifically with process. So we have computers with internet access. There's wireless access with throughout the Capitol. We can make copies of testimonies. We have reference material. We conduct workshops. We also have a charging station. So if you're ever at the Capitol and your phone or your tablet or laptop is dying, come by and you can recharge it at our office. I don't want to spend too much time about us, but you can reach us by calling 587-0478 or visiting our website at lrbhawaii.org/PAR. And if you need to email us, you can email us by sending an email to par@capitol.hawaii.gov. So we're going to start talking about government. As you know, our government is set up to have a separation of powers. There's 3 separate but equal branches of government. There's the legislative branch that makes the laws, the judicial branch which interprets the laws, and the executive branch which implements the laws. So basically, because we're dealing with the legislature, we're just going to talk about the legislative branch of government, and specifically the state legislative branch. You know, above us we have Congress. They make laws for the entire country. Below us we have the county councils. They make laws just for their specific counties. But the Hawaii State Legislature makes laws for the entire state of Hawaii. Our legislature is considered a bicameral legislature, meaning that there's actually two chambers within the Hawaii State Legislature. The upper chamber is considered the Hawaii State Senate, and the lower chamber is the Hawaii State House of Representatives. They both serve the same function. They introduce legislation, but they each have their own special powers. So let me talk a little bit about how they're different. There's 25 state senators, 51 House members. This is actually in the Constitution. Each state senate is state senate district is about twice as large as a House district. The state senate has the power of advice and consent, so they confirm all of the governor's appointments. The House also has a special power that not a whole lot of people know about. They have the power of impeachment. So anytime the charges are brought against the governor or a lieutenant governor for wrongdoing, the House would actually conduct those proceedings. State senators are elected to 4-year terms. Their terms are staggered, so they're not all up for re-election at the same time. The House members are elected to 2-year terms, so every 2 years they have to run for re-election. What do these lawmakers do? They serve as actual voting district's voice at the legislature. Each address in the state of Hawaii has 1 senator and 1 representative to speak on their behalf at the legislature. Besides introducing legislation and working on legislation, they can also help their constituents by serving as a mediary between state agencies and particular people. So if you guys are ever having a problem with particular departments like Department of Agriculture, Department of Education, Department of Land and Natural Resources, you can communicate with your legislator and ask them to help you with whatever issue you need help with. So in order to make the whole legislative process a little bit simpler, they organize themselves into committees that are focused on particular areas of legislative policy. There are 19 House committees and 14 Senate committees currently. If you can imagine, the chairs of these committees have a lot of power. They have a lot of authority because they actually decide which bills move forward and which bills don't. So chairs have a lot of power. Committee members are also part of the discussion, but usually they would defer to the chair's authority. So you want to make sure for those bills that you're concerned about, you want to know who the chairs of the committees are that these bills will go through. Now, who decides who's on these committees, who's chairing these committees, who's members of these committees? That's actually decided by leadership. So leadership, when I'm talking about leadership, I'm talking about the presiding officer in the House and Senate. This is the House Speaker and the Senate President. And directly below them, there's the majority leaders. And so they work in conjunction with the majority leaders to actually formulate policy for that particular session. And again, they also decide who's on these committees and who's going to be a chair of these committees. This is kind of decided. Somebody asked me, how is this decided? Well, it's kind of like a popularity contest. After each election, the majority members will get together, and the majority members for the past 50 some odd years in Hawaii have been Democrats, and they'll get together and amongst themselves, they'll decide who's going to be their leaders. And a lot of it is politics. They may They may support a particular person because they're friends with that person. Maybe they feel that this person can do the best job. Sometimes there's individual groupings of legislators that come together to support one person. So that's kind of how leadership is decided. Now, in performing the service for the people of Hawaii, they introduce bills and pass bills that end up becoming laws. They adopt resolutions. Now, resolutions don't have the force and effect of law, but they can state the legislature's position on a variety of issues. They can call for the creation of task forces, call for studies, audits. Some things can only be done via resolutions. Anytime the state wants to sell state land, they actually have to approve that land sale via resolution. And anytime they want to regulate a new industry, they also do that via resolution. Sometimes if bills aren't moving forward, they may put the idea into a resolution to kind of give it a little bit of help. They also propose amendments to the Hawaii State Constitution. Constitutional amendments follow the bill to law process, so they're actually introduced as bills. They get referred to committees. But if they pass the legislature, instead of being sent up to the governor like every other bill, they actually are sent to the voters, and we vote on those amendments during the election cycle. They also approve the state budget, but just because they put money into the budget for a variety of issues, capital improvement project, administrative costs, that doesn't mean that that money actually gets spent. So the governor has the power of the purse strings. They just appropriate funds. So when does all of the action happen at the Capitol? It's actually happening right now. Most of the calendar year we're in the interim, but per the Hawaii State Constitution, legislative sessions begin on the third Wednesday in January, and they go for 60 legislative days or working days. These days, when I'm talking about working days, these are the days where the House and Senate members actually convene to conduct business within their respective chambers. Any holiday, any weekend, any day that is a designated recess day, which means that they're just not meeting to conduct business in their respective chambers, do not count towards those 60 days. So it usually starts it'll always start the third Wednesday in January, so about mid-January, and go through usually late April or early May. Prior to each session, the Senate President and House Speaker will get together to publish an official schedule of deadlines. And this is called the legislative calendar. This is important because everything is decided based on dates within this calendar. If you want to see this calendar, if you don't have it, you can go to our website, lrbhawaii.org/PAR. We have our session calendar there. It's color-coded so you can see what the deadlines are for bills, resolutions, and the budget deadlines. And on the back of this calendar, we have descriptions about what all these deadlines mean. So they can be quite tricky. If you have trouble understanding what the calendar, the specific dates, you can always give us a call and we'll help you out. The calendar is also available on the website, on the upper left corner of the Capitol website. And again, the address is capitol.hawaii.org. .gov, I'm sorry. So every legislative session starts with a party. Last week's Wednesday was the first day of session. Legislators usually have their offices open for kind of a meet and greet. At the public access room, we also have a party. So if next year, if you guys want to come by, feel free to come by our office, and you can also visit with your legislators because most of them will be open and available during opening day festivities. Okay, let's get into the how a bill becomes law process. So each bill starts off as an idea to do something, to change something, to make something better. Let's use this young man as an illustration of him looking at this traffic problem. So the problem is traffic, and then once you know what the problem is, then you come up with ideas to address the problem. So that's kind of how bills start off. They start off as an idea to do something, to change something. Some of the ideas are good, some of them are bad. You don't really know how good or bad an idea is until you actually send them off, as a bill. And when committees hear the bill and schedule it for a hearing, a lot of people have perspectives. And so if you didn't realize certain things about a certain bill, you may become more familiar with the good points and the bad points during the actual committee hearing process. So in order to start a bill through the process, people need to find legislators to introduce the bills for them. In other states, you can introduce a bill by just filling out a form on their Capitol web pages. But for us in Hawaii, you need to be a legislator. So if you have bills for ideas for bills next year, because today is actually the bill introduction deadline, so you'll have to introduce bills next year. You can always start with your representative or senator who represent you directly. Those are the first people to go to. The next people you can go to are the chairs and members of relevant committees. So if it's a transportation bill, if it's an agriculture bill, if it's an education bill, you kind of want to go through those subject matter chairs and members, or anybody who has supported similar issues in the past, and you can also communicate with them as well. So this is kind of how it works. Per the Constitution, again, session starts on the third Wednesday in January. This year it was January 20th, when that was just about a week ago. The window for introducing bills are really quick. So session opened last week Wednesday, and today the bill introduction deadline comes at about, I think, about 6 o'clock or so. So it's only about a week to introduce legislation. During this time, they're probably dealing with about 3,000 to 3,500 bills, and that's a lot of bills that are being introduced. So that's why you always tell people, if you have ideas for legislation, work on it during the interim period, so you're not up against this deadline. This is what a bill looks like. Each bill will have a HB or an SB. That just stands for the chamber that it originates in. So anytime a legislator, a House member introduces a bill, it'll become an HB or a House bill. If a senator introduces a bill, it'll be an SB or a Senate bill. Some people are interested in the number that's behind it. That's just actually the number that it's filed at, so it's kind of irrelevant. This is just, if we look at this bill for an example, it's House Bill 1243. This was just the 1,243rd bill that was actually filed with the House Chief Clerk's office. So every bill will have a number, and it will have a title. The titles will usually be broad, relating to transportation, relating to education, relating to agriculture. They make the titles broad to give themselves some wiggle room to maybe make changes, because the body of the bill always has to fall under that title. So this is how it looks like, and then each bill will have an effective date towards the end. So these are all the things that have to happen in order for a bill to become a law. They have to pass through all the committees that the House and Senate refer to, pass 3 readings. When I say readings, it's just a vote in the actual House and Senate chambers, and this is where all the members actually convene. House and Senate has to agree on the exact wording. Sometimes the House will pass a bill over to the Senate and vice versa, and the non-originating chamber will make changes to it. Whoever sends it over the first time has to actually be approving of those changes. And then it has to be signed into law, or allowed to become law by the governor. And when I say allowed to become law, that just means that he doesn't veto it. So if he neither signs nor vetoes the bill becomes law automatically. If he tends to veto the bill, he needs to let the legislature know. He has a deadline to let the legislature know before the end of session, so they can override his veto if they choose to do so. And he's got to get through all these things by the deadlines. Again, the deadlines are listed on the legislative calendar that we talked about a little bit earlier. So this is kind of how bills become law. So bills are first filed with the Senate or House Chief Clerk's office. They go through an initial reading, an initial vote in their chamber of origin. All bills pass first reading. You could have the worst bill you can think of. It'll pass first reading because honestly, most of the work that's done at the legislature is actually done in the committee hearing process. Following the first vote, bills are referred to subject matter committees by leadership. So leadership decides where which committees these bills will go through. In order for bills to continue to move forward, they have to be scheduled for a public hearing and passed out of the committees that they refer to in the order that they're referred and meet the deadlines that we talked about. The second vote or second reading usually happens after a bill moves past its first or second referral, and then the third reading will always come after the bill moves past its last referral. Bills that make it past its originating chamber cross over to the other chamber, and the process is repeated. It's important, if a bill doesn't get heard, it will miss upcoming deadlines and will die in committee. This is the fate of most bills that are introduced at the legislature. We talked about the power dynamics of the chair a little bit earlier. So the chair has the power to schedule a bill for a hearing. If you are supporting bills that have been referred to a committee but are pending a hearing, call the chair's office, communicate them via phone or email, and ask them to schedule the bill for a hearing, because if they don't and it meets a deadline, it'll die. If you meet resistance from the chair's office, you can always talk to other members of the committee to ask them to go to bat for you and talk to the chair on your behalf. At the public access room, we have a list of committees and room schedules, and these lists are also available on our website. And if a hearing does not get scheduled, then, or if a hearing does get scheduled, so if you're successful in getting a chair to schedule one of your bills for a hearing, make sure to offer testimony. After a bill is heard, the committee may vote to pass the bill out without changes. This is when they just pass it out unamended. They may pass the bills out with changes, in which case it becomes an amended bill. They can either hold or defer the bill. Usually after committee hearing, if you hear the chair saying that they're going to hold the bill, it's most likely dead. If they defer the bill, they can bring the bill back for deliberation at a later time. Sometimes those times are defined, where the chair will let the public know when they're bringing the bill back for further deliberations, or sometimes they don't. So if they don't set a date for decision making, a future date for deliberations, it may not get voted on at all, in which case it will die in the committee. So sometimes bills are amended in committee. If changes have occurred, to see the actual changes to the bill, you'll have to wait for the committee report and the new draft of the bill. If you're tracking the bill, you'll be among the first to know. And we'll talk about tracking upcoming. So committee reports are important because they summarize the changes that the committee makes. It's kind of a synopsis of what happens at the hearings. Changes could be technical. They may add a defective date, which kind of throws people off. The changes may be substantive, or it could be a gut and replace, where they take the contents of a bill out and insert entirely new language. So these are all the things that can happen when bills make changes to it. When the bill changes, it keeps the same number. It's just given a new draft. So SD or HD stands for Senate or House draft, and the number behind it, it's just the number of times it's changed. So if you see an SD2, that means that the Senate changed it twice, and an HD2 means the House changed it twice. If the bill is successful, it'll continue to move forward, and there'll be more than one hearing. So you want to make sure that you review the previous testimony to better frame your arguments for the future committees. Consistency kind of helps, so make sure your message is consistent, and then let your supporters know that they may need to testify repeatedly. Sometimes this frustrates people that they have to testify so often, but if you're having to testify a lot at hearings, that's kind of a good thing, because that means that your bill is moving at least. You never know who's going to be helpful in your quest to advocate for your bills. So staff could be very helpful. If you have leave behinds, information sheets, you could leave it with their staff if you can't meet with legislators directly. Teaching the legislators about your issue is important, because sometimes they may not be as familiar with the issue as you are. And then relationships are very important at the Capitol. It's not a monolithic entity. You want to make sure that you try to have a relationship with chairs of committees and with committee members, because it'll be helpful in the long run. And if you've got a good relationship with the legislator, ask for their advice. They can be very helpful. They may know who's for or against the bill and why. They can help you determine when pushing is needed or when you need to kind of ease up on your focus. At the end of session, it's sine die. It's the last day of session. By this time, all bills have to pass out of the legislature and be on to the governor's office by the end of the day. Then the governor has his own deadlines to either sign, veto, or allow the bill to become a law without his signature just by not vetoing the bill. And then we're back to the interim, where most of the research work is done. This is a good time to meet with legislators, because they're far more available than they probably are now. And you can work with them to craft legislation or to make changes to things that have been introduced in prior years. Before you know it, it's the third Wednesday in January, and the whole process begins again. So Hawaii's legislature is bicameral, but it's also biennial, meaning that it's actually a 2-year cycle that starts in an odd-numbered year and ends in an even-numbered year. So anything that was introduced last year that didn't make it is technically still alive this year. And that's why it's important to remember, if you have bills on a tracking list, if you're keeping track of bills that were introduced last year, that died last year, keep track of it this year, because it's technically still alive this year. It'll have to actually miss legislative deadlines this year for it to be dead entirely. What can you do just to kind of add your voice? You can vote on your state senator, state representative, vote on proposed amendments to the Hawaii State Constitution. You can run for office or help somebody else to do so. The only qualification is 3-year resident of the state of Hawaii, live in the district that you want to represent, and be 18 years of age and older. It's important for you to communicate your views and priorities with your legislators, offer testimony on proposed legislation, and then always join with others to amplify your voice, because the louder the voice, the easier it will be to get that voice across and for the legislators to actually listen. So how can you add your voice? I'll talk a little bit about advocacy at this point. Communicate your position with your elected officials so that they are aware of your concerns and issues that are important to you. You can send them a letter, send them an email, or a phone call. Having worked for a bunch of legislators, actually getting mail is really old-fashioned. They really enjoy that, so that's a good way to do it. But you can also email them or call them. If you can't talk to them directly, which will be the case during session, talk to their staff. Make sure you leave your return number or information on how they can get back to you. Sometimes people think that legislators don't listen. They may not always agree with you on issues, but they do listen. I can vouch for this because, again, I've worked for a bunch of them, and they know that if they don't do their job, they can get voted out of office. So even though they may not agree, they'll listen and they'll get your communication. So these are kind of ways to make your letter effective. Be brief, clear, and to the point. It's important to not talk around issues. The more precise your letter is, the better, I think. 1 or 2 pages in your own words. Be courteous. The legislature deals with a lot of emotional issues, a lot of issues that are tough, and sometimes people get emotional. But try to be courteous, because you'll get that in return. Explain your position and why it's important to you. And then always include, your return address if you're sending a letter in, or contact information, and make sure you sign and write legibly. What about testimony? So a lot of times people think that just because a bill is introduced, they can offer testimony. They email all the members, all the legislators about particular bills that they may not even be working on. So send in testimony only when your bill has been scheduled for a hearing and the committee has indicated it will be accepting testimony. Because if you try to send testimony outside of this, the odds of them not really paying much attention to it is high. Time is usually short, so if you find bills to track and are interested in tracking bills, draft your testimony for that bill, even though it hasn't been scheduled for a hearing. Because once it is scheduled, it'll be easier for you to submit that testimony, and you're not having to rush up against the deadline when they're receiving testimony. So guidelines on how and when to offer testimony will usually appear on a hearing notice. This is kind of what a hearing notice looks like. Anytime a committee schedules measures to be heard, they have to file a hearing notice letting the public know that a certain committee will be hearing bills a specific date at a specific time and a specific place. And on the bottom where you see that blue arrow in blue, that's how they want to receive testimony. So usually you have a link where you can submit your testimony, and they'll tell you how quick they want the testimony. So usually they'll send this hearing notice out 48 hours in advance of a hearing, but they'll want the testimony in 24 hours before the hearing. And so you actually only have like about a day of being noticed. And so that's why it's important for you to draft your testimony prior to that. So when you do get the hearing notice, if they do schedule a bill for a hearing, you can just submit your testimony and you won't have to try to create it and rush against the deadline. There's no rules regarding exactly what testimony should look or sound like. That's primarily up to you. but we do have a kind of a cheat sheet and an outline that you could use. This is also available on our website. We have this available in our office as well. So this is just kind of an outline on who to address it to. Make sure you always include the bill number, the hearing date and time, and also the place, and introduce yourself at the beginning. Let them know whether you're testifying in support or opposition of a bill. If you just want to submit comments, you know, in the body, explain why you feel the way you do. If you can list any facts, that would be helpful too. And then in closing, just kind of restate your position and include your contact information in the bottom in case they have questions and want to contact you. There's many ways to submit written testimony. You can actually deliver it to the offices. So in the House, it's the Vice Chair's office that processes all the testimony for a committee. In the Senate, it's the Chair's office. You can also fax it. A lot of the legislative offices are phasing out their fax machines, but they'll put a fax number on the hearing notice, and you know, they'll receive your fax that way if some of you choose to do it that way. You can also email it to specific committees. But if you do it via the email way or the fax way, you won't get confirmation that the committee actually received your email. So the best way to do it is to use the form on the legislature's website. This is on the Capitol homepage. You can just click in that box right there. Of course, you have to register and be actually signed in. So if you do, you can click on the Submit Testimony link. If you have not registered, register. There's a link on the top of the homepage. Click on Register. Just add your email address and your username, I think, and a password. It'll send you a confirmation email. Click on the confirmation email, and you're actually registered. And then after that, you just have to sign in using your sign-in credentials. When you're signed into the website, these boxes will turn orange. Click on the Submit Testimony box. Just enter the bill number and click on Submit. It'll tell you the committee that's hearing the bill, the room number, the date and time. You can actually take a look at the hearing notice by clicking on View Notice. Add your name and whether you're testifying as an individual, part of an organization. State your position and whether or not you'll be at the hearing. So if you have your testimony already saved as a Word doc or another doc, you can just choose it from your desktop or wherever you have it saved and attach it and send it in that way. But you can also type your testimony into the additional comments area, and then it'll show up in an email form. It looks like a printed email. It's a little bit harder to read, but they can still see it. And then you would click on the Agree to the terms and submit your testimony. For those of you that are going to be testifying in person, it can be kind of it can be kind of nerve-wracking, you know, having to speak before committee members. Everybody's looking at you and listening to what you're going to say. But you'll always address them at the beginning. The chair of the committee, the vice chair, and members is a good way to start your oral testimony. Keep your testimony short, you know, and simple. Introduce yourself and the group or organization that you're representing. Clearly state your position, that you're in favor, in opposition, or just adding comments. If there's alternatives, you may want to state that as well. Again, be courteous, respectful, and professional. And remember to breathe. You know, it can be kind of nerve-wracking, but if you just take the time out to focus on your message, I think it'll be helpful. And then tell the truth and don't exaggerate. You want to become a trusted resource. So if you exaggerate, you know, you're not going to be a trusted resource, and that's not what you want. Find others who agree with you with your position, so you can amplify your voices. Make use of organizations to help spread, you know, your message, and then listen to those who disagree with you because they may be your best teachers. They may actually tell you, you know, a better way to, you know, to solve a particular problem, or to get them to be less confrontational. So it's kind of, again, it's a lot of it at the legislature is based on relationships. So you should be able to talk to everybody. Things happen really quickly, so the turnaround time is really short. So again, be prepared and ready to go. That's why it's important for you to just draft your testimony, even though the bill hasn't been scheduled. That way, when it is scheduled, you can just send it in. Form testimony is tempting because it's easy. You just sign your name to a form. they'll see it, but it's always better to kind of consider writing a sentence or two in your own words because it'll be your own. If you miss the testimony deadlines, turn it in anyways. This is important. If the committee asks for testimony to be received by a certain time and the time has passed and you have not submitted your testimony, send it in anyways. They'll mark it as late, but the committee members will still have access to it, and they'll see your testimony, and you'll be able to see your testimony online as well on the bill status page. So if you miss the deadline, just turn it in anyways. The Capitol website is a really good resource. This is the website address. It actually won a national award. So there's a bunch of good things that we're doing in Hawaii. We have a website kind of guide to help people understand what they can do on the website. This is available on our website and in our office, so come by and grab one. It kind of tells you about the functionality of the website, what you can do. Measure tracking lists are important, so I just want to talk a little bit. I know I'm kind of running close to my time. Measure tracking lists are important because it can help you keep track of bills. So the first thing to do is to register with the website, sign in using this box right here. It'll ask you to create a list, and you can name it whatever you want. Name it after yourself, name it ag bills, pesticide bills, whatever you want to name it. Click on create list. For us, we named it priority ag bills. Once the list is created, you can actually click on show list. The list will be empty at the beginning, but you populate your list by just adding all the bills you want to keep track of. You can keep track of 1, 2 bills, 3 bills, 20 bills, 500 bills, all the bills. So the website is very functional. So you populate it by just adding the bill number, SB in the number, HB in the number. When you're done populating your list, click on the generate report list. You can also comment. You can also save comments. And this is kind of, because there's a lot of bills, it also has a function to allow you to type notes into each measure that you want to keep track of. Once you're done doing all of this, click on generate report. It'll bring up all the bills in a report form, and then you can order it by measure, which will be done in numerical order, or order it by current status, which will put all the bills that have most recent action on it at the top. Instead of having to go through each individual bill status page, you can see all the bills on this one page. So this is very handy, and this is what creating bill tracking lists are very helpful. So just a couple of tips. You can create, 1 list, 2 lists, whatever works best for you. When you print them out in landscape style. You can convert it to a PDF and send it to to people. And then, as we talked about earlier, instead of just deleting dead measures from your list, for the bills that die in the first year of a biennium, create a dead measures tracking list. Add everything to that list, and then the next year you can just move those bills over to your tracking list because they're technically still alive again. If you're confused, not to worry, because we're available all the time via email or phone, and we have lots of resources at our office. Again, this is the Capitol website. This is our contact information. I know there's a lot to go over. We have individual information sheets on how to sign up for hearing notices, how to create measure tracking lists, a lot of different things too, just information on conference committees, resolutions, deadlines. So feel free to visit our website, send us an email, or give us a call. I think that's it. So I'm going to turn it back over to Danya at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I learned a lot. I have about 5 questions so far, but if you have any other questions, please feel free to type them in, and we'll get to them if we have time. So first off, how do I know if I'll be able to testify? Will I receive an email, or do I just show up?
Okay, that's a good question. So if you submit testimony via the website, you'll get a confirmation link that lets you know your testimony was received. If you want to testify in person, you don't actually have to have your testimony in there. What happens after each bill, the chair goes through each the testifiers for all of the bills that they're working on. After each bill, after they come to the end of their registered testifiers list, They'll ask for additional speakers, in which point, if you don't have your testimony in and you want to testify at that time, you're allowed to do so. But if you submit your testimony through the website, you'll get a confirmation link letting you know that your testimony was received. And if you signed up for testifying in person, you can testify in person. But again, you don't actually have to be registered. You can just submit your testimony or go up to testify when the chair calls for additional speakers or testifiers.
That was great. Perfect. So now I have a question from Ashley. Ashley, I'm going to have him answer your question, and then I'll unmute you if you want to clarify at all. So Ashley would like to know, she wants to be active in the process and the happenings at the Capitol, but is wondering if she can only do that during those 60 days. Is there bill tracking or other work she should be doing besides, coming up with ideas for bills during that interim period?
Another good question. So the 60 legislative days are the days that they're actually meeting to conduct business. So that's the time that you want to be most visible. You want to be most vocal. But a lot of the work for advocacy actually begins prior to session. Again, this is building relationships with the members of the legislature that are going to be deciding bills that you're working on. So if you're working on agriculture bills, of course you want to build relationships with the members of the agriculture committees in the House and Senate. You can talk to the chairs. If you have any information to give them, reports that come out that you want them to have access to, you can do that prior to the beginning of session. So it's kind of laying the groundwork prior to session for all the work that you're going to be doing during session. But you can advocate throughout the year. Legislators, again, are a lot more available to meet with you during the interim because they're not running off to committee hearings. They're not having to go down to the floor for floor sessions. They're not having hundreds of meetings scheduled. They're more available. So this is the time to actually work with them, to build relationships with them, to supply them with information. So when these bills actually are before them during session, you already have your foot in the door, so to speak.
Okay, that was really helpful. Ashley, I'm going to unmute you, see if you want to add. You can go ahead.
Oh, no, that was perfect. That answered my question exactly. Thank you.
Okay, great. So on to the next. What is the best way to set a meeting with a legislator?
Contact them. A lot of people think that legislators don't want to meet with them. I can't speak for every legislator, but the best way to actually set up a meeting with them is to contact them directly. Provide as much information as to why you want the meetings with them. If you can't meet with them directly, if you have friends that have somewhat of a relationship with particular legislators, this is the time to use them to kind of get your foot in the door. So you can communicate with people that actually have relationships with legislators and ask them to help you schedule a meeting with them. Some of them just meet with everybody that kind of wants to meet with them. Some are more selective, depends on the legislator. But the best way is to just communicate with them. So call their offices, ask to schedule a meeting with the legislator. If you can't meet with the legislator directly, meet with staff, because a lot of times staff is doing all of the groundwork. When I was an office manager in the House, I actually met with a lot of people. And then I was able to take that information and communicate with my representative on why they wanted to meet and to give them the information that was meant for them. So they'll still get it. So you can meet with staff as well, but just try. Communicate with their office. Let them know why you want to have a meeting. Again, use people that may have relationships with this particular legislator. And if you can't meet with them directly, ask to meet with a staffer, and that's kind of the next best thing, I think.
Perfect. That's really helpful. So if I have an idea for a bill, do I need to draft it myself before showing it to a legislator? Or do I just show up to their office with an idea?
That's a question that we get asked a lot at the public access room. So you don't have to know how to draft a bill. You don't have to know how to format a bill. The only thing you have to know is what you want your bill to do, and you need to get the legislator to understand what you're trying to get the bill to do. There's 5 drafting agencies at the Capitol, including the Legislative Reference Bureau, which we are a division of. They're nonpartisan, so they work for all legislators. But they have legislative analysts and attorneys in all the drafting agencies, and they take your idea and they put your idea into bill form. They format it. They do legal checks for you. Only legislators can submit bill requests. So for you, take your idea to the legislator. You just type your idea out. Sorry, I'm just kind of speaking too fast. Type your idea out on a Word doc or on a piece of paper. Kind of lay out what you want the bill to do. If you can use past legislation as a guide and say, okay, I want the bill to kind of do what this bill is doing, that will be helpful. Some legislators may ask you to, to get more people on your side. Some actually introduce the bills just because you ask them to. They do it by request. But you don't have to know how a bill is drafted. There's actually people to do that at the legislature. So you don't have to know any of that. The only thing you have to know is what you want your bill to do, and to be able to explain what you want your bill to do to the legislator, who will then take your idea and send it for drafting.
Nice, so that's really helpful. Good to know. So a couple more questions. Feel free to submit them if you have any others. Next question is, if I submit testimony for one bill and then I submit the exact same testimony for another bill, is that a bad idea?
Not really. Sometimes it's good to kind of change your testimony up, so long as your testimony applies to the bills that they're actually hearing. What happens sometimes is people will, at the beginning of session, they'll draft a piece of testimony. A committee schedules the bill for a hearing. They submit their testimony. That committee changes the bill. It becomes a new bill. It goes on to the next committee. The next committee comes. That same testimony is used, and it may no longer be applicable to the bill that they're working on. So, just be mindful that you want your testimony to reflect the bill that they're actually reviewing at that point. But if it's the same bill, if the bill hasn't changed, it's okay for you to submit the same testimony that you submitted in the past. Just change the dates and the committee. If you're sending personalized testimony to committee members, make sure that your testimony is addressed to the committee that's actually dealing with that bill.
Okay, great. So last question. Can you just show up to a hearing without having submitted testimony, and would you expect to be able to speak in that instance?
Yes. So committee hearings are open to the public. You don't have to be signed up to be able to walk into a committee hearing. Anybody can walk into a committee hearing. You don't have to be registered to be able to present testimony. Again, at the end of each the testifier list for each bill, the committee chair will call for any additional testifiers. If you didn't submit testimony, that's the time for you to walk up and present your oral testimony. They'll probably ask you to submit your testimony in writing as well, so they have it on the record. But you don't have to be registered prior to a hearing to be able to testify. Just wait for them to call for additional testifiers. And again, each hearing, it's a public hearing, so it's open to anybody. You can just walk into a conference room and actually watch the hearing, and if you feel compelled to present testimony, you can do so.
Okay, great. Well, that wraps it up. Let me just switch it over here. So first, I want to thank you so much for sharing with us today. That was really interesting and helpful for me, and I'm sure for everybody listening. Just want to let you all know that tomorrow you'll receive an email that has a video and audio recording of the presentation. So you'll have that as a reference if you want to share with anyone else in your life that you think would be interested. You'll also have a brief survey. Please fill out that survey. Let us know how it went, and if you have any ideas for future trainings, we're open to do whatever you think would be helpful. So please share your opinions with us. You're now added, if you said yes, you're added to the Building Power listserv, so we'll keep you in the loop on any upcoming webinars. And finally, please reach out to me, Dania Hakim, via email. My email is here with any questions you have. So thank you all and have a wonderful day.